relations between the United States of America and the European Union, of the bilateral relations between the United States of America and the European Union. History. The EU and US are the biggest economic and military powers in the world. Despite the lack of a common EU defense policy, they dominate global trade. They play the leading roles in international political relations, and what one says matters a great deal not only to the other, but to much of the rest of the world. And yet they have regularly disagreed with each other on a wide range of specific issues, as well as having often quite different political, economic, and social agendas. Due to the European Union not having a fully integrated foreign policy, relations could be more complicated where the EU did not have a common agreed position, e.g. EU foreign policy was divided during the Iraq War. Understanding the relationship today means reviewing developments that predate the creation of the European Economic Community. Comparison. Trade. Euro-American relations are primarily concerned with trade policy. The EU is a near fully unified trade bloc, and this, together with competition policy, are the primary matters of substance currently between the EU and the USA. The two together represent 60% of global GDP, 33% of world trade in goods and 42% of world trade in services. The growth of the EU's economic power has led to a number of trade conflicts between the two powers, although both are dependent upon the others. Economic market and disputes affect only 2% of trade. See below for details of trade flows. In 2007, a transatlantic economic council was established to direct economic cooperation between the two. It is headed by the U.S. Deputy National Security Advisor for International Economic Affairs and the EU's Commissioner for Trade. However, it is yet to produce solid results. A transatlantic free trade area had been proposed in the 1990s and later in 2006 by German Chancellor Angela Merkel in reaction to the collapse of the Doha round of trade talks. However, protectionism on both sides may be a barrier to any future agreement. Cooperation. NATO Quint. The Quint is an informal decision-making group consisting of 5 Western powers, the United States and the EU Big Four. It operates as a directoire of various entities such as NATO and the G8, G20. The idea of a trilateral axis on foreign policy issues was proposed by French President Charles de Gaulle to his British and American counterparts. However, the plan was never implemented. Meetings between the foreign ministers of these 3 countries and West Germany became known as Quad meetings around 1980. They were largely symbolic and led to no real decision. The Quint in its current form seems to have begun as the contact group excluding Russia. Nowadays, Quint leaders discuss all major international topics, participating in video conferences once every 2 weeks and meeting one another in various forums such as NATO, the OSCE, the G20 and the UN. The Quint meets also at ministerial and experts level. Arms embargo on the People's Republic of China. Both the United States and the European Union as of 2010 have an arms embargo against China, put in place in 1989 after the events of Tiananmen Square. The US and some EU members continue to support the ban, but others, spearheaded by France, have been attempting to persuade the EU to lift the ban, arguing that more effective measures can be imposed, but also to improve trade relations between China and certain EU states. The United States strongly opposes this, and after the PRC passed an anti-secession law against Taiwan, the likelihood of the ban being lifted diminished somewhat. defense contracts. In March 2010, EADS and its U.S. partner pulled out of a contract to build air refueling planes worth $35 billion. They had previously won the bid, but it was rerun, and EADS claimed the new process was biased towards Boeing. The European Commission said it would be highly regrettable if the tendering process did prove to be biased. There was substantial opposition to EADS in Washington due to the ongoing Boeing-Airbus dispute. Iran's nuclear program. The United States has not ruled out the use of force against Iran regarding the Iranian nuclear program. France, Germany and the United Kingdom have taken the lead to solve the issue diplomatically, while representing the interests of the United States in negotiations with Iran, since the United States has had no official diplomatic relations with the country since 1979. Spying. Secret documents obtained by German news magazine Der Spiegel in 2013 state that European Union offices in the United States and United Nations headquarters have been targeted for spying by the National Security Agency, an intelligence office operated by the United States government. The reports revealed that the United States bugged offices, accessed internal computer networks, obtained documents and emails, and listened to phone calls. Subsequent reports from the media further state that domestic European Union offices in Brussels have also been targeted, along with EU offices. Embassies of India, Japan, Mexico, South Korea and Turkey are also listed as targets in the documents. On June 30, 2013, the President of the European Parliament, Martin Schulz, demanded for a full clarification from Washington and stated that if the allegations were true, EU and US relations would be severely impacted. Issues. EU-US summits. Annual summits are held between United States and European Union policymakers. When these take place in Europe, they have historically taken place in the country that holds the rotating presidency of the European Union. List of EU-US summits. Boeing and Airbus subsidies. The two companies are the major competing aircraft manufacturers, and both Boeing and Airbus are accused of receiving forms of subsidy from the United States and from some of the European Union member states, respectively, which both sides have criticized each other for doing so. The pressure for this issue to be resolved has increased as Airbus and Boeing are now nearly equal in commercial aircraft market share. Genetically modified food. Genetically modified food is another significant area of disagreement between the two. The EU has been under domestic pressure to restrict the growth and import of genetically modified foods until the safety is proven to the satisfaction of the populace. On the other hand, the United States is under pressure from its agricultural businesses to force the EU to accept imports, seeing the EU's restrictions as alarmist and protectionist. Rendition. The Washington Post claimed on November 2, 2005 that the United States was maintaining several secret jails in Eastern Europe. Poland and Romania, however, have denied these allegations. Also, Central Intelligence Agency planes carrying terror suspects would have made secret stopovers in several West European countries since 2001. Belgium, Iceland, Spain, and Sweden have launched investigations. The Guardian calculated on November 30 that CIA planes landed about 300 times on European airports. Most planes would have landed in Germany and the United Kingdom as a transit point to East Europe, North Africa, or the Middle East. In the meanwhile, the European Commission, on behalf of the European Union, asked the United States for a clarification The EU has refused to confirm or deny the reports. Extraordinary rendition flights through Europe were investigated over a number of years by the European Parliament, and it held a temporary committee on the matter. The EU has also opposed the use of Guantanamo Bay detention camp and offered to host them former inmates when its closure was announced by the administration of U.S. President Barack Obama. Death penalty. In the United States, capital punishment is a legal form of punishment, whereas all European member states have fully abolished the death penalty, and consider its use to be a violation of fundamental human rights. This occasionally causes problems with EU-US relations, because it is illegal in the European Union to allow the extradition of a citizen to a country where the death penalty is a legal punishment, unless a guarantee is given that such punishment will not be used. International Criminal Court positions in the United States concerning the ICC vary widely. The Clinton administration signed the Rome Statute in 2000, but did not submit it for Senate ratification. The Bush administration, the U.S. administration at the time of the ICC's founding, stated that it would not join the ICC. The Obama administration has subsequently re-established a working relationship with the court. Iraq War. The Iraq War divided opinions within European nations and within the United States, with some states supporting of military action, and some against. The European public opinion was staunchly opposed to the war. This caused a major transatlantic rift, especially between the states led by France and Germany on the one hand, who were against military action, and the United States with the United Kingdom, Italy, Spain and Poland, among others. Kyoto Protocol. The European Union is one of the main backers of the Kyoto Protocol, which aims to combat global warming. The United States, which initially signed the protocol at its creation during the Clinton administration, never had the measure ratified by the United States Senate, an essential requirement to give the protocol the force of law in the United States. Later, in March 2001, under President George W. Bush, the United States removed its signature from the protocol, leading to much acrimony between the United States and European nations. In 2008, President Barack Obama said that he planned on setting annual targets to reduce emissions, although this doesn't include the Kyoto Protocol, likely because developing nations are exempt. Visa waiver reciprocity. The EU is requesting from the US reciprocity regarding the visa waiver program for all its members. The European Union has threatened with the possibility of imposing visas for American citizens that would extend to the entire EU. In 2008, many of the EU's new Central European members were granted visa-free access to the US, and currently, 5 out of 28 EU members lack such access. Privacy. In the autumn of 2015, in the wake of the Snowden revelations in Europe, the dissimilar interpretations of privacy prevailing in the United States and Europe came to the surface in an upset of the international safe harbor privacy principles by a court ruling of the European Court of Justice. Resolved issues. Banana wars. The European Union and United States have had a long-running dispute over the EU's banana imports. As part of their international aid, the EU offered tenders on a first-come first-served basis for bananas from countries in Africa, the Caribbean and the Pacific. The United States argued that this favored local producers in former colonies of EU member states, over US-owned corporations in Latin America. The Clinton administration responded by imposing heavy tariffs on luxury goods created in the EU. Such goods included cashmere from Scotland and French cognac brandy, made in the original constituency of then Prime Minister of France Jean-Pierre Raffarin. The Clinton administration then took the banana wars to the World Trade Organization in 1999, when Chiquita made a $500,000 donation to the Democratic Party. The two sides reached an agreement in 2001. U.S. steel tariffs. In 2002, the United States imposed steel tariffs to protect its steel industry. The European Union and other countries took up the issue with the WTO, which ruled that such tariffs breach its regulations. Subsequently, by December 2003, the tariffs had been lifted by the U.S. administration. Delegations. Diplomatic relations are maintained between the US and the EU as an independent body, as well as all EU member states. The EU is represented in the US by the delegation of the European Union to the United States in Washington, D.C. Opened in 1954, it was the first overseas delegation of the EU's forerunner, the European Coal and Steel Community. The current EU ambassador to the United States, since 2014, is David O'Sullivan. Additionally, all 28 EU member states have an embassy in Washington, D.C. The United States' diplomatic mission to the EU is the United States mission to the European Union in Brussels. The current U.S. ambassador to the EU, since 2014, is Anthony Gardner. The United States established a diplomatic mission to the ECSC in 1956 in the city of Luxembourg and, in 1961, the United States mission to the European Communities in Brussels. The U.S. has embassies in all 28 EU member states. The Transatlantic Economic Council is a bilateral forum for economic cooperation between the EU and US established during the 2007 US-EU summit. It meets at least once per year and is jointly headed by the U.S. Deputy National Security Advisor for International Economic Affairs and the EU's Commissioner for Trade. Bibliography. Luca Bellaccio, Il futuro dei rapporti euro-americani e la fine del sistema internazionale in SGSTEA. Locatelli, e l'Europa sicura. La politica di sicurezza dell'Unione Europea. Milano, EGEA Bocconi, 2008, 185-205. Luca Bellaccio, Anglosfera, forma e forza del nuovo pan-anglismo, il nuovo melingolo, Geneva, 2006. Luca Bellaccio, La Eterna Alleanza.